for Arizona.
That could be false hope.
I don't know. It could be.
False hope.
I'm just enough. Stop it. I don't want America supporting everybody in the world. I want to start supporting ourselves. It's not our job.
All right, no, I'm not here.
That's right, including other countries.
How is it? I already
Check.
lost my
Test,
pen
test.
from the other room. What is it?
ABC 1, 2, 3. It's kind of low though, a little bit. Kind of can't.
Okay, just let me know when we're recording over there.
Well, you got 5 people out there. Ask them. I'm sure they knew the list was there.
Check.
They even still do that at Littleton too.
Looks like it was a
Ask.
purchase well worth it.
Oh, I got a green pen.
You guys hear me over there? Whenever we're ready, just let me know. We're ready? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting. Please prepare for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together this evening to discuss the business of the city. I pray that you would give us wisdom beyond our own ability and that you would help us to deliberate in the best interest of the city. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, there are members Olson, Barentine,
Here.
Gillett,
Present.
Martinez,
Happy first day of spring, everybody.
All right.
Russell,
Present.
Yates,
Present.
and Mayor Jefferson.
Here.
6 present and 1 absent, the 1 absent being Councilmember Olson.
And Councilmember Olson did let us know she was going to be out tonight, so she sends her regrets. Let's move on to agenda item 5, that is consideration of minutes of previous session. I'd entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, move we approve the council minutes for 6 March 2017 as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any amendments or comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is recognition of scheduled public comment. We do have 3 speakers this evening. Our first speaker is our new Citizen of the Year, Mr. Doug Cohn, an Englewood resident, will address council regarding historic preservation. Oh, I think that's appropriate. Good evening, Mr. Cohn.
I'm embarrassed.
You're embarrassed now. You should see what your wife wrote about you.
Oh. I want to talk about reusing historic buildings. As you've driven back and forth on Dartmouth, you've probably noticed that church-looking building on the corner of Pennsylvania and Dartmouth. That piece of ground has been a worship location for a very long time. In the early 1920s, the Mormons had a dugout area there with a canvas top and used it during the warmer time of the year to do their services. In 1923, the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints built the current building. It was built as the first church of the Englewood branch of the Western States Mission. They outgrew that site and moved to a larger building out in the countryside in 1955. The place they moved to is on Tufts, just east of Clarkson, out in the wilderness. That church is still there. In 1958, the Salvation Army bought the property, and the Army consolidated the Denver area operations with the new location. The name was changed from the Denver Temple Corps to the Englewood Temple Corps. They retained their focus of helping the poor and the sick and the homeless and the addicted with physical and spiritual help. In the summers, they put on camps for the kids in the Englewood parks. On Sundays, vans would pick up the kids from the trailer parks and bring them to Sunday school. They had puppet shows and other activities in the youth center right next to the church. In the aftermath of the 1965 flood, the Salvation Army, the Englewood Salvation Army, provided clothing and other supplies to those who were damaged in the flood. They got big enough that they needed a new house of worship, and they bought the Cherry Lynn Baptist Church at 4300 South Lincoln Street in 1974. That's the place where the Wellspring Church is right now. In 1994, the Army moved to Arapahoe Road and Colorado Boulevard, where they are right now. The Salvation Army still has an outreach here in Englewood, so if you know people in need, please contact the Army. The Englewood Outreach is located in the same building that has the Englewood Housing Authority at 3460 South Sherman. If you have clothing or food or money to donate, they would be gratefully accepted. And if you feel God is calling you, they're looking for volunteers. The Army sold that building to two talented women who started a music school in that building in 1979. It's called the Grenoble Studio of Music Arts, run by Barbara Grenoble and Peggy McCrary. The music studio has been teaching and creating performances for kids from kindergarten through middle school. They even have adult classes. The classes provide children with the basics of understanding music through movement and percussion and ensemble and voice. An example of a historic building that's been used and reused and reused. A great purpose for that. I applaud all the guys who didn't tear it down. And thank you. Just one more thing. Just across the street from there, where the K.D. Smith Company is, that's the Schobert's grocery store from 1919. I'll have to get more information on that. I'm still working on that one. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Let's see if we got any questions for you. Councilmember Russell.
Would you mind giving us a copy of your speech? Because it's hard to write all of that down.
I can do that.
And
Does
I love that
everybody want one?
information.
I can email it.
If
Okay.
you wouldn't mind emailing it, yes.
Thank you.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to our second speaker. This is Coween Dickerson, an Englewood resident, will address council regarding communications. Good evening, Mrs. Dickerson.
Good evening. Coween Dickerson, 2835 South Pennsylvania Street. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights take precedence over state law, and especially over code enforcement and our city charter and ordinances. James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, expounded on rights and property in 1792 in a short essay published called On Property. Selections from that essay and summary of it follow. In the narrow sense, Madison says, a man's land or merchandise or money is called his property. But in a wider sense, a man has a property in his opinions and the free communication of them, in the safety and liberty of his person, in the free use of his faculties, and free choice of the objects on which to employ them. As a man is and is said to have a right in his property, he may equally said to have a property in his rights. This statement represents a profound expression of the individual's sovereignty over his possessions of every kind, spiritual, intellectual, and material. According to Madison, a human being is master of his mind and body, his beliefs and possessions, his person and his property. It is all the province of the individual to create and control. Madison argues that there is no parceling of rights. Our rights to life, liberty, and property are indivisible. In summary, the right to life is the source of all rights, and the right to property is their only implementation. Without property rights, no other rights are possible. Government, according to Madison, is instituted to protect property of every sort and is judged solely by this yardstick. You all took an oath to uphold the Constitution and a subordinate oath to state constitution and city charter. Many, if not most, of our codes and ordinances are egregiously unconstitutional and should be eliminated, not selectively enforced and selectively interpreted. I have recently been told that according to code enforcement and the prosecuting city attorney, I cannot have planters in my front yard or stored on my property unless it is in a garage or permitted shed when nothing can grow. There are a number of rather silly and egregiously ridiculous codes that are beginning to be enforced, still selectively and unreasonably interpreted as violations. The poop ordinance is notably one which is rearing its smelly head once again to the detriment of citizens in the guise of benefiting the community. The community nor the city have any precedence over individual property rights. You represent the citizens. You control your employees, who are the city manager and city attorney, and hopefully soon the judge, and direct them and eliminate most of the codes that violate citizens' property rights.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me see if we have any questions from council for you this evening. Seeing none, I'll thank you for speaking tonight. Our next speaker is Elaine Hults, an Englewood resident, has a question for council. Good evening, Ms. Hults.
I'm Elaine Hults from 3333 South Main Street, number 706, Englewood, Colorado, 80113. To postmortem what Colleen said, code enforcement had no right to take my dog out of my car when I was injured and take him to the ASPCA and put him up for readoption. He was chipped and it should have been followed. Thanks to my friends, they went and got him quickly. Okay, I have some questions for you, the City Council. And here's the first one. What is the true site plan for the Acoma Lofts? I've been watching that development. I can see it very clearly off my patio. I've gone on the web and I see several pictures, but nothing matches what's out there. Number 2, why did 5 of you vote to pay an invoice that was higher than the contract amount? And if you don't remember what that was about, it was Excel Energy. So check your notes. And why did 5 of you approve a budget that was not balanced? This boggles my mind. Number 4, why are you buying police vehicles with the money in anticipation for the money from the bond issue, which is intended for the police building, which I'm against? However, if there is a shortfall, who's going to pick it up? Do you know what a shortfall is? Not enough money that you collected from the bond. Perhaps the answer is based on a comment that Representative Olson said when she stated she trusted the city employees. Well, we, the people of Englewood, did not vote for the city employees. Like President Harry S. Truman, who was maligned and later found out to be one of our greatest presidents, he said, "The buck stops here." That was a sign on his desk. That I'm sure was before your time, but I was growing up in that era. And I will say to you, the buck stops with you, not the employees. You are the people that were elected to protect our city and to do what the majority of people in this community vote for you to do. I haven't seen too much of that. However, my rabbi says, the definition of a fool is one who makes decisions without knowledge, like a not balanced budget. Another saying that he has that I love is, disloyalty is a decision to cause the downfall of another or a situation. In my opinion, several of you are disloyal to those who have worked, trusted, and voted to put you in office. To protect our city, that's what you swore to do. To make decisions that the majority of the population wants you to make. Let's see what happens at the next election. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if council has any questions for you this evening. Seeing none, I'll thank you for coming and speaking tonight. We're going to move on to agenda item 7. This is recognition of unscheduled public comment, and I think we have no one signed up this evening, so we will move on to council response to public comment. Would anybody like to kick us off there? I do have a couple of responses. To Doug Cohn, again, congratulations on being selected our Citizen of the Year. It's great to have you here and highlighting Englewood's rich history, which I really think differentiates us from a lot of other communities in the metro area. So I appreciate your efforts there and looking forward to a great night of celebration with your friends and family. Coween, thank you for your comments. I appreciate the concerns about property rights. I share those. I like to think that I'm a champion of some of those rights. I think where some of your issues come in are probably with the selective enforcement as well as what you consider perhaps the beginning portion of somebody else's rights. I can't recall who said this, but a wiser man than me once said that your right to swing your fist ends at my nose. And, apparently somebody a while back when looking at code regulations decided that the neighbor was being harmed by, some of the issues that you brought up. And so I think if you could highlight some of those specifically, I think the one I heard tonight was planters or potters in the front yard. Is that an appropriate use for the land here in Englewood, and does that somehow negatively impact your neighbors? I think is a subjective question that this council has never really addressed, but if we could identify a couple of those and take them on, I'm happy to do that. Moving on to Elaine, thank you for your questions this evening. I'm going to attempt to answer those. Mr. Keck, could we get a site plan somewhere, maybe disseminated to council, that we could get to Elaine for the Acoma Lofts project?
Yes, sir. And Mayor, just as a point of clarification, I have provided Ms. Hults with the actual site plan as well as the elevations for the building at a previous time. I'm happy to give that to council as well.
I'd appreciate that. Voting on the invoice with Excel, I think that was not with Excel. Was that with somebody else? Somebody can help refresh my memory. Who was that invoice with?
The cameras and recording equipment.
Recording equipment, that's right.
Just as a point of clarification on that, Mayor, you actually did authorize the invoice for iCompass to be paid in full, and I did send out an email last week that after talking to iCompass, they've given us the lower rate because they failed to communicate the 5% increase effectively with us.
Thank you. Good work there. The reason I personally voted for approval of that is just because I trust Manager Keck's ability to deal with those issues and navigate those issues. In fact, I think he did a fabulous job of getting us a great deal, but I guess I just didn't want to delay our payment or be delinquent in our payment if they could legitimately justify those charges to Mr. Keck, and I trust his ability to do that. Just for the record, I think the difference between the invoices was just over $1,000, and so, again, with that amount, $1,500-ish, somewhere in that range, with that amount, I put my full faith and credit in Mr. Keck to make those decisions on behalf of our community. As far as why I voted for a budget that wasn't balanced, I would argue to you that we did pass a balanced budget. There was a surplus in the general fund that was actually budgeted in 2016. I want to say 2016 was our first budgeted surplus in the general fund since the 1990s, so we're heading in the right direction in that regard. I think what Ms. Hults is really pointing out, though, is our long-term capital needs and the major concerns that have. The reason why, when you look at all of our fund spending levels, I believe, is because you're seeing some of those funds save some money up in order to be able to do capital projects. And I'm really proud of the fact that these last couple of years, we've been able to do a lot more in capital projects than in years past. Mr. Keck, is it possible to get I'm sorry, is there a comment there? Okay, sorry. I was just asking if it's possible to get some information to council regarding total, perhaps capital improvements or budgets, trying to give a highlight perhaps of the last 5 years to get an idea of where some of that spending is going.
Yes, sir, we can provide that to you.
Yeah, and do you think I'm generally accurate when I say that we're able to do a lot more in capital projects than we have been in the past because of some of that saving up in those funds?
That's accurate, sir.
And so that's why I voted for it. I generally see that a surplus in the general fund and additional expenditures in the outside funds as a very positive sign for our community and a very positive sign of our fiscal health. Of course, we're nowhere near out of the woods. When you look at our long-term needs, they total $200 million, somewhere in that range, that we have no idea how we're going to fund. But so I think we need to remain diligent, but I think from a sustainability standpoint, we've addressed a lot of these issues. Police vehicle purchase you asked about, and I think what Ms. Hults was pointing out was that if there was money left over from the $27 million bond that was passed by the voters in November, perhaps some of those funds could be redirected towards something besides the building itself, including something like equipment or vehicles for the police. And candidly, that has not been discussed by this council, and a decision has not been made. Right now, we need to make sure that we take care of the building. Once we get through the design portion of the building, we'll figure out if and how much there is remaining left over, and whether or not that amount should be refunded back to the taxpayers in the form of probably a shorter bond term would probably be my guess, or whether those funds would be retained to do something different. Or do you think it would be a difference in the rate, or do you think it would be a difference in the term?
You probably see a difference in the amount that's borrowed as opposed to the term.
Okay, there you go. So slightly lower payment perhaps for each of us on our property. But that is a discussion that it needs to come forward after the design discussion from council. So, perhaps a discussion several months from now would be my guidance on that. Those are the comments I had for this evening. Councilmember Barrington?
Excuse me. Cohn, I appreciate your concern about the consistency of enforcement, and I think that we're working on that. I mean, when you have a system where you're trying to do things by complaint only, or we had just as much when the pendulum swung the other way and code enforcement went down and did it all. There is no home, there's no property in this city that isn't violating some code. And maybe you're right, maybe some of those need to be looked at to see that maybe some of them aren't worth enforcing, or whether we prioritize things, how we do that. And then we've switched more to a complaint-based, and then that has its issues too, because then neighbors start getting pitted against each other, and they would prefer that it was the code enforcement officer who saw a violation and did it, rather than require some citizen to go ahead and make the complaint in order for it to happen. Then the only way you get code enforcement complaints is if you have people who are more aware in their community or care more about a particular issue. So to make it more even, I'm sure it's something that, as what Mayor Jefferson said, we'll be discussing. I appreciate that. The Acoma lofts, I share your concern about that, because what is the elevation? What is the height?
Councilor, I don't recall the exact height. It's in the MUB3 district, so I believe it's 100 foot's allowed in that particular district.
And so, I mean, similar to the Quincy Lanes, the one that wants to build in that industrial area right next to there, is saying it's a 3-story, but it's 40 feet. And so I'm not sure that there wasn't some disconnect with people on what they imagined story-wise was going to be there, especially with that parking lot under there, and the kind of mammoth thing that's kind of going in now. Maybe there was a different idea when they saw the original design. So I'll look forward to getting that from the city as well. And I agree with you. There is, despite the mayor's explanation for his vote, I did not vote for the budget, and the reason I didn't, for whatever explanation there is, what that sheet of paper that we voted on was not balanced. The sheet of paper, the revenues and the expenditures were not balanced. So regardless of all of the explanations and the meanings behind it, unless we do it in a different manner or separate it out, I would agree with you, and that's my opinion, that we did not vote for a balanced budget. That's not what that sheet said. So I'm not going to give you as long an explanation as the mayor did, but I'll leave it with that. And Doug, congratulations again. Probably you'll just get to be red-faced for the next several months now. So it was very nice what people submitted for you. We are all very proud of all of the things that you have accomplished. So I'm looking forward to even more being added to that list. There was a plethora of things that were missed, and there was already a plethora of things there. So I look forward to that, and congratulations again.
Thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item 8. This is communications, proclamations, and appointments. There's nothing tonight, so we'll move on to number 9, consent agenda items. At this time, I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda items.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items 9A, B1, C1, C2.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Councilmember Barrington.
I'd like to pull 9B1, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell.
I don't know. I have some questions on 9C 1 and 2. I mean, it's not going to affect the vote, I don't think, but we can just leave them if
you'd like, you could comment and explain something about those issues. If you have a specific question for staff, it is Mr. Comer, so we could direct those questions now if you had one.
Okay, well, on I do have a question, like on 9C1, where it gives a summary in the middle. On February 28th, staff received a disciplinary appeal, and then that also is included. I'm really thinking that perhaps it should have been left out of the first one. Do you understand what I'm asking? Okay. And I mean, we could.
It's on C1 or C2?
It's actually, it involves C1 and C2.
Okay, thank you.
I think C1 was to generate C2 in my reading of it. And so I think there was some stuff put in C1 that shouldn't have been.
You mean under the summary?
Yes.
Communication itself.
Yes. Well, actually, then it was not put in the, right, it's only in the summary, I believe. So that doesn't really change anything, right?
It's not affecting page 70 of 140. I mean, that's what we're actually voting on this evening. Do you see any requirement for an amendment on page 70 of 140, the actual resolution?
No, it's just a council communication.
Okay.
The resolution itself appoints Mr. Eisenberg and Mr. DeFalco as the hearing officers for the year of 2017. And then this council communication is just a motion appointing Mr. DeFalco as the hearing officer in this matter.
Does that resolve your issue, council member, or would you like?
Yes, it does resolve it.
For further discussion?
No.
Thank you. That leaves 9C 1 and 2 remaining on the consent agenda. We have a first and a second with no further comments. Please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
We'll now come back to 9B1, the Partners in Energy Memorandum of Understanding. Again, this is a recommendation to adopt an ordinance to enter into a Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Englewood and Excel Energy or Staff Sources Assistant City Manager Murphy Robinson. Good evening, Mr. Robinson.
Good evening, Council.
Since this was consent, if you don't mind, we'll skip the presentation and go directly to questions. Thank you, Councilmember Barrington.
Since you presented before, and I pulled it because I have the same reservations. It's still the same study. I was at a meeting where
Right now we are in the question portion for Mr. Robinson.
It's just for the same reason. So I don't think I saw anything change in here. So nothing in this that we brought up before was changed.
Oh, ma'am.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Further questions for Mr. Robinson? Seeing none, I entertain a motion on 9B1. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Further discussion on 9B1? Councilmember Barrington?
Okay. Now it's for the same reasons that I did before. I was at a meeting, and just the mere fact that part of the reason that they think that we have a savings to attain is because we have large homes. 57% of our homes are large, which brought ruckus laughter from the audience, and I was glad I could entertain them. And then the fact that we have a disproportionate amount of millennials, and those creeps are breeding and bringing families, which I thought we wanted, and in this report kind of bemoans the fact that we've got that, and those people use too much energy. So I think there's a lot of flaws in this whole thing, and some inconsistencies that brings the concern that I just don't support it. So that was it.
Councilmember Russell.
I will be voting no again, mainly because I don't believe it is the place of government and a monopoly to cooperate with each other. I do have some issues about in the residential area, wanting the residences to cut their expenses. Every person, I mean, we put in new windows, we've added insulation, there's a lot of things that we do, but to be required, and at this point it's voluntary, but it will become mandatory, and I don't think it's the city's place to partner with a monopoly. So I will be voting no.
Thank you. Just to comment on that, I will be supporting this. I'd like to thank Xcel Energy for funding this study. I do think this is generally a win-win. I do think the general goal of this is energy cost savings for both our residents as well as businesses by evaluating the system itself and understanding where we can gain some efficiencies. It creates a win-win for all of us, and I hope that it always stays voluntary. My intent never is to force consumers' behavior. They, I think, have a decision to make about how much energy you consume based upon the rate. And so I certainly would never want to monkeying around on that. But again, I appreciate Xcel's willingness to partner with us on this and actually fund this entirely. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you, and I agree actually with Mayor Jefferson, and I just want to reiterate that it is all 100% voluntary. There's going to be no mandatory saving of anything. If you don't want to save energy or you don't want to save money, you don't have to participate in any of these programs. There's nothing we're going to force on anybody, just making it available so that if residents or businesses do want to learn how to save in their homes or in their businesses, that we provide a place for information and tools to do so.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record show 4 ayes and 2 nays. The 2 nays being Councilmember Russell and Barentine.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11. This is ordinances, resolutions, and motions. Under 11C, we have resolutions and motions. Under 11C1, we have the Englewood Littleton Wastewater Treatment Plant Digester 2 Roof Dome Engineering Design Services. The Englewood Littleton Wastewater Treatment Plant recommends that council approve by motion a professional services agreement with Brown and Caldwell for the Digester 2 Roof Dome Engineering Repair Design Services in the amount of $66,860. This recommendation was approved by the Supervisory Committee during its regular meeting on February 16, 2017. Our staff source is Project Engineer number 4, Chong Wu. Good evening, Mr. Wu.
Good evening, Your Honor. Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Chong Wu with the Wastewater Treatment Plant. So this project is a project to do a repair to one of our digester roof dome covers. So currently at the wastewater treatment plant, we operate 5 digesters, and these are used to stabilize our wastewater solids, or in other words, to make them inert just prior to our dewatering operations. So digester 2 is the one that's in need of repair, and that's the one denoted with the white roof cover there. So digester 2 has a structural steel dome cover that's bolted onto a concrete tank wall. So the issue is we discovered the presence of methane gases at the perimeter right here. So once that was discovered, we took the tank immediately offline and did an investigation of the structural elements both internally and externally. So what we found was that there was damage at the junction, at the joint between the tank wall and the steel structure. During the investigation, we also found the presence of moisture and severe corrosion, And also, you can see the roofing elements and the membrane elements there just basically falling apart, deteriorating. So this whole perimeter section needs to be rebuilt in order to put this digester back into service. So having this digester back into service is a critical need for the plant. So as a staff, we looked at alternative delivery options to give us the best repair option at the quickest time possible. So we looked at progressive design build as being the option for the plant. So in this model, we as the owner would contract with a design build team to conduct both the design and the construction of this repair project. So in progressive design build, it's a two-phase procurement approach. So in the first phase, we would contract with a design build team to do the design and pre-construction services. And this would include developing specifications, drawings, the schedule, and also developing the bidding documents. We then would work as a staff with the design build team to have input in the design of this project. And at approximately 60 to 90% design, we would then work with the design build team to negotiate the guaranteed maximum price. And then the second phase would be to issue a contract to the design build team at that guaranteed maximum price. This is similar to the approach that the city is undertaking currently with the police station, I believe, that general contractor, construction manager, general contractor approach. So the benefits of this progressive design build is that we would have immediate collaboration between the owner staff and the design build team. It would hopefully generate some innovative new ideas on how to do this repair. This would be an open book process, so the design build team would actually procure all of the goods and services to conduct the repair, and we would have access to all of the costs, so we would know where every dollar was actually spent. This is a single point of contract responsibility, so it would mitigate any potential claims from the contractor and design team. And this also mitigates risk to the cities. The design build team would now take on all the risk to deliver this project at that guaranteed maximum price. And then for us, this provides a quicker project delivery, which is advantageous. So we're recommending that Brown & Caldwell engineers be awarded the first phase of this project to initiate the design and pre-construction services. Brown & Caldwell actually did the initial investigation, so they have intimate knowledge of what needs to be done in terms of the scope of work. Obviously, Brown & Caldwell has done work with us in the past, so they understand our plant, our processes, and more importantly, they can hit the ground running on this project, which is very advantageous for us. They prepared a cost proposal in the amount of $66,820, and this project was budgeted and will be shared by each of the cities of Englewood and Littleton. For the construction part, we anticipate that guaranteed maximum price would be negotiated at the either end of summer, early fall, and then presented back to council for your approval. That concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council? Councilmember Barentine.
Will this be presented to the Littleton Council for their approval as well?
No.
Why is that?
As stated previously, the Englewood City Council is the managing partner of this plant. Mm-hmm. So once the supervisory committee approves any contracts, it's given to the Englewood Council for their approval.
Okay. And this might have been in the process before we had the joint cities meeting, because I'm surprised that you're referencing the meeting, but I didn't see it in here. Where the decision got made, the supervisory committee meeting?
Yeah, that was at the February 16th supervisory committee meeting.
Are those minutes out?
Apparently, yes.
Were they?
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Those minutes are out, and they're on the Littleton Englewood wastewater treatment plant site. Those supervisory committee meetings, it does follow the joint use agreement between the cities of Littleton and Englewood.
I just would suggest that they get put into the contract. Anytime you're referencing a decision that got made at another meeting like that, those minutes might have been good to be included in here, because I don't think that they might have just been put on when we agreed to do that last week, but I didn't see them.
Okay. Other questions? Councilmember Russell?
What are the advantages? I'm assuming we did not do an RFP.
No.
So what are the advantages of doing a design build? I mean, if we do an RFP, then we get competitive bids, correct? So I guess I'm asking, how do we know that we're going to get the best deal that we possibly can get?
Well, in terms of this project, for us, time is of the essence. So that's why we decided to go with this progressive design build model. And in terms of selecting the actual contractor or vendor to do this project, we did not do an RFP because in terms of the city purchasing policy, we can actually negotiate with a vendor that's based on qualifications and competencies, and that's what we chose to go with our engineer of record, if you want to call it. They've been worked with us for years, so we're confident in their capabilities to perform the scope of work for this project. In terms of the belief that we'll get the best value, design build is a relatively new, emerging kind of project delivery method, and it's proven, well, it's been stated by others that it does provide better value to owners and municipalities because it eliminates potentially the contingencies, the change orders, because now the design build team is working together collaboratively and delivering this project.
This is no reflection on you or that decision. My nephew works for a big plumbing contractor, and you're right, it is the method of choice. But the cost overruns are huge. They are never low. They are always over. And, I mean, he said that. He's an estimator, and he said it was very frustrating to him because of how high the bill gets, and you pay it. So that's just, I think we maybe should rethink some of this.
Well, that's why that guaranteed maximum price is advantageous to the cities, because now the risk is now borne on the contractor to deliver that project at that guaranteed maximum price.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One question I have is, if we did switch vendors, would that vendor need, I guess, time? Certainly you said time to catch up on where Brown and Caldwell's institutional knowledge of our operations are at, but would it also create billable hours for them to be able to understand those internal operations to design this, or could they pretty quickly get up to speed?
Yes, I would say yes, it would.
Yep. And so do you have any idea of how much, that cost might be for another firm to come in and catch up as far as institutional knowledge of our own operations?
I can't even begin to even estimate what that cost would be.
No, fair enough. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Barentine.
Just a couple of things that you brought up. You said that time was of the essence. When you showed those pictures, that's not a time is of the essence kind of picture. That kind of damage doesn't happen quickly. It's not like it was a catastrophe or there was some
Sorry, again,
tornado.
we're under questions, so please, council members, remember to ask a question during this portion. We can debate each other, but I don't think we want to debate Mr. Wu.
What he may see as a debate, I have a question, and that doesn't appear to be that kind of damage. That seems to be more long-term damage, so I'm concerned why you're phrasing it that way, that time is of the essence. Did we wait too long? Did we not anticipate this better? Why is it being phrased that way?
I apologize for that. So in terms of how we operate our digesters, we operate with two primary digesters and one we call storage digester or loadout digester. Mm-hmm. So digester 2 is our dedicated loadout digester. So while that tank is offline because we can't operate it because of the methane gas leak, we have another digester that's dedicated as the loadout digester. And so currently we have no backup digester. That could be a loadout digester. That's why I say time is of the essence, because we need to get this tank back into service.
So that's not something that you would have on a regular maintenance schedule to have anticipated to allow you a little bit more time?
Well, this kind of damage was not anticipated at all in terms of being the structural elements of the dome and the concrete tank was not anticipated at all. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then the other question I had was that you said that the design build was kind of a fairly new way of doing it. Do you think that you have enough information, since it's kind of a new process, and talking about what Councilmember Russell said, to really have enough data to say that it would be cheaper? Were you able to look at enough data to?
Yes, we've been researching design build for quite a while now. We've actually had discussions with the purchasing division to actually go in that route. So we've had discussions with other municipalities and other wastewater treatment plants through this region, and we've had some seminars and conferences. And design build is something that is coming. And like I said it before, with the new police building, you're doing alternate delivery projects currently now.
So you're saying it's a new process, but you're also saying you've had a lot of experience with it. So I guess it's just confusing.
Well, it's new for us.
Oh, okay. So how long has the design build concept then been around? Because you say it's coming, but you just mean to us, and everybody else has had a lot of experience with it?
Yes.
Okay. And then the guaranteed maximum price that you mentioned, that, again, to Councilmember Russell's question about the overrides, you said one of the safety things that we have is they can't go over the guaranteed maximum price. But without an RFP, how do we know that the guaranteed maximum price is a good one? Like, what would you use to gauge that? If it's a guaranteed maximum price, then are you assuming that it's going to come in way under that?
Well, as I stated, it's an open book process. So once we get to that 60 to 90% design, we're going to have access to all their books. So they're going to get quotes, they're going to get bids for all the trades, the purchases that they have, and then we can look at all the numbers together, and then so we can assess whether that guaranteed maximum price is legitimate, or if it's too high, maybe it's too low in our estimates, which would be good for us.
All right, thanks.
Councilmember Yates. When it comes to your inspection of the dome, I'm assuming you guys do this every 6 months, a year, or whatever. What did you have to do in order to determine that there was damage like that? I mean, it looks like it's kind of a piece where you've got some sort of coating over the top of it. I mean, did you have to? What was the process? Yeah,
so I just showed you a small portion of what we looked at. We actually had to take that digester offline, and then we do a confined entry to look at the internal. There's an internal membrane layer inside there that's also been damaged. And then to look at that exterior picture that I just showed you, we actually had to tear out that roofing membrane to actually get a visual of the underneath. There's a multi-layered membrane system and then a rubber roof over the top, so we had to take all that out to see the, we didn't do the whole entire perimeter, but we did a large section, points along the perimeter, and see that that damage was consistent throughout.
And the giveaway was the fact that there was methane coming out of it.
Right, that was the initial indication, yes.
So in order to do that inspection, you actually literally had to take those areas apart. So, okay, that would explain why it wasn't being caught up on inspections on whatever frequency you do it. Would you do me a favor and explain to the public a little bit more of what design build means to help folks understand what that's
Sure.
about?
So the traditional method, typically that the city has done in the past, design bid build, where we actually have a design, develop the specifications, the drawings, the package, and then we put that onto, let's say, the Rocky Mountain BidNet system, and then we have contractors actually put sealed bids to do the work, and then we do a public opening, and then basically select not the lowest bidder, but the lowest responsive bidder to do the project, and then they actually build the project. So in design build, you're actually doing the design and the construction together collaboratively, so it's one team that's actually doing both the design and the construction. So essentially you get some advantages in terms of a designer may not necessarily know the constructability or the feasibility of doing some sort of a construction, where you actually have a construction team that actually has, hey, this is a better way of doing this, let's do it this way. So that's that collaborative effort between the design and the contractor to build this team.
So when the contractor comes online with the engineer, how does that time frame, how does that work?
It would be immediate.
Immediate, okay. So the contractor, or I should say the guys physically doing the work, is that going to be, that's going to be determined later who that's going to be, right? Or is that a part of? It'll
be determined later, yes.
Okay. Now, how do you determine what contractor that will be?
Well, that's up to the design build team. Brown and Caldwell will act as our, for lack of a better term, our general contractor. So they're going to select all the vendors, the subcontractors, all the trades, and all the materials.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell, do you have another question?
Yes. Was Brown and Caldwell part of the original design of this equipment?
The original design of the equipment was during the 1970s, so that would have been HDR that did that.
Okay, so they didn't necessarily know about it from the beginning. Another question that I have, is methane a natural byproduct of the digester?
Yes.
So is it possible that this would happen again?
Well, hopefully not, because we'll actually do a better job of doing the installation.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'd entertain a motion on 11C1. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilmember Barentine.
At the March, just a couple of weeks ago when we had the joint city meeting, we had some discussion from both councils about going over professional services contracts, what can be approved by the supervisory committee, about having those notices and having that meeting be public, about the authority and limits. That was actually brought up by the city manager from Littleton, and there was quite a bit of discussion again, as there was in October, about just automatically going to Brown and Caldwell for things. There was some angst about this and not having bid processes. While this portion of it is a little bit lower starting out, it leads into what you said, that they're going to be the general contractor. They're going to be hiring other people, and I don't think that that's going to sit well with our partners over there. In Littleton, I think that their intention was to go ahead and get a little bit more conversation started, and that we're doing this, 2 weeks, week after we just met and agreed to have a little bit more interplay with each other, with our partner in this plant and Littleton City Council as well. I'm a little concerned about doing this, and I'll not vote for it. I don't think it's in the spirit of what we just discussed a little over a week ago, and the concern with Brown and Caldwell just going ahead and getting this and it being called again a professional services contract instead of a bid process. It just is everything we talked about at that meeting that was of concern. So, not you. Again, it was part of what came out of that meeting, and I'd like to honor that, and I don't think out of the chute we're doing that.
Thank you. I have another question, I guess, and that is, how much input will we have on contractor selection through this process?
How much will you or we?
I guess either the supervisory committee or the city council of Englewood.
I guess you would have as much as you would like. I know that the staff will have input in terms of, who we use in terms of vendors or subcontractors, and then, of course, the recommendation will be made to the supervisory committee to proceed forward.
Thank you. I did hear some of the things that Councilmember Barentine was concerned about regarding Brown and Caldwell. I think that that's a discussion that we do need to have in the future. Hearing that time is of the essence for our operations, I will be supporting this. I will ask for some oversight of this, knowing that there is some sensitivity with contractor selection and some other issues. But again, hearing the time is of the essence, we need to get this thing back online for our operations. Hearing that another vendor would have to spend substantial, I'm not sure exactly how much that is, but a substantial amount of time, knowing these guys charge a fairly high hourly rate, I could imagine that percentage of the contract would be a relatively high percentage, and I hope that most can agree upon that. So I will be supporting this tonight. Councilmember Martinez?
I just have one other question as it relates to the schedule that is in our packet. With this one piece of equipment kind of out of commission, if you will the plant still be able to operate at the same capacity?
Yes.
Okay, so because it has an estimated completion of November?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
I have to say, as a contractor myself, this process of working with the engineers and trying to work on the design and how to go about getting the job done, at least in my world, helps a lot, because quite frequently engineers, they're not, now Brown and Caldwell is probably a little bit different than the engineers I work with, but typically they're not as aware of the surroundings. They know how to do the math, they know how to do the paperwork and draw it out, but a lot of times as a contractor, you know how that's going to affect the object next to it, or go from one step to another step and make recommendations. Frequently in those processes, on a small project, I'll save my customer anywhere between 5 and 10% if I'm there before the engineering is complete. And there's a lot less of that as-builds where you have to go back and redraw things in order to match up to what you actually ended up having to do.
Thank you. Other comments on 11C1? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show 4 ayes and 2 nays, the 2 nays being Councilmember Russell and Barentine.
Moving on to 11C2, this again is the Englewood Littleton Wastewater Treatment Plant Geographical Information Systems 2017 Operations and Maintenance Services Agreement. The Englewood Littleton Wastewater Treatment Plant recommends that Council approve by motion a professional services agreement with CDM Smith, Inc. for the 2017 Geographical Information System Operations and Maintenance Services Agreement in the amount not to exceed $32,370. This recommendation was approved by the Englewood Littleton Wastewater Treatment Supervisory Committee during its regular meeting on February 16th, 2017. Our staff source again is project engineer for Chong Wu.
Thank you, Mayor. So the wastewater treatment plant currently maintains a sanitary sewer geographical information system network, or GIS. This was actually started back in 2003 as a means to gather a centralized database of all the collection system sanitary sewer. It was evident back at that time that we did not have a complete set or a database of the sanitary sewer. We had a scattering of old paper maps. They were very incomplete. We lost some papers, and some of the districts we had absolutely no data. And also at that time, we were anticipating new federal regulations regarding sanitary sewer overflows. So the need to have a better understanding of the sanitary sewer network more holistically was needed. So we developed a stakeholder work group that was made up of representatives from both cities and various members of the sanitation districts. A pilot website was developed in 2004, and then in 2007, a full-scale GIS was implemented. So at that time, the stakeholder group also recommended that the wastewater treatment plant maintain ownership of the GIS. So that would mean that we'd bear all the responsibility for the O&M costs. And then the cities and the sanitation districts would participate by providing the data, any data updates, any corrections, any new development as needed to maintain the site. So I thought I'd just show you some quick snapshots of what the GIS looks like and what it does. So this is an overview of the service area GIS, and so if I can study my hand, the wastewater plant is that little tiny green dot right there. So our service area extends south along I-25 to Lone Tree, and we go as far southeast as Roxborough Park area. So the whole service area encompasses about 108 square miles. We have over 1,100 miles of sewer and over 28,000 manholes. All the different, or the various shading here represents the 21 different sanitation districts in our service area. So the next slide, this is a zoomed in portion of Englewood, and again, the wastewater plant is this highlighted area over here. These yellow lines over here represent the sanitary sewer lines, and then these purple lines here represent major interceptors, and these are sanitary sewers greater than 20 inches in diameter. Okay, this is going to be hard to see. So we have advanced search functions, and we have some parcel data. So over here, I actually did a search of address 1155, and then I highlighted 1155 West Oxford Avenue, and then it shows up as the Englewood Rec Center. And if you could actually see it, you will see that it actually shows up as the sanitary sewer district is the city of Englewood, and the owner, of course, is the city of Englewood. In terms of some applications, we do have, as part of the applications, upstream and downstream sewer line tracing. So in this example, I'm doing a downstream sewer line trace from the rec center to the wastewater treatment plant. And all those blue circles represent manholes along the path. And you could actually highlight those manholes and get attribute data information, which is located here on the left. And then lastly, this is an example of a sewer line data attribute data. It's kind of hard to see, but it would show that it belongs to the city of Englewood. It describes what the type of material, the diameter, and if the district has that information, we would have GPS coordinates, elevations, pipelines, et cetera. So CDM Smith, they were the original developer of the website, and since 2007, they've provided the ongoing maintenance and web hosting of this GIS on a continual basis. We would recommend continue with third-party maintenance and hosting, as it is more efficient and more cost-effective than us trying to provide dedicated plant resources. CDM proposed a budget of $32,370. This project was budgeted, and the cost will be shared by each of the cities. Any questions?
A few questions for Mr. Wu. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your presentation. Just my understanding, just to be clear, is this is not a new system that we're buying. We're upgrading an existing system.
Right. It's just the ongoing maintenance. So for 2017, we're actually going to upload the new 2016 Dr. Cog aerial imagery. They'll provide regular updates that the districts provide to them, and then any on-call technical support that anybody has for them.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine?
So the contracts are fairly standard contracts? I mean, just what you...
Yeah, it'll be a professional services contract.
And so they're pretty much the same as they are for the city, as they are for the sewer plant?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's the same form. It's the same form that we use. It's the same format the city uses. We use that.
Okay. Well, then I would expect that all the information in there is accurate and correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Further questions for Mr. Wu? Seeing none, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion on this item? Councilmember Barentine?
Just for the same reason as I stated before, we just got done with the bi-city plant meeting. There were a lot of concerns that were brought up. You have decisions that were being made at the supervisory level that should have been included and shared with us at that time if we were bringing this up. Although you couldn't have anticipated that we were going to do that prior. However, now that they've stated that, you didn't know in February that we were going to have, well, some of those concerns were brought up. So I'm not saying that you're doing this to skirt it under because you couldn't have known in February. So I don't want to misstate that. But now we are voting on it, and now we do know that they have the concerns, and so I share those as well. And 30,000 here and 60,000 here, and add them all up, and you're starting to talk about real money. So it's close to 100,000 that we're passing tonight, and I really do think that we could have some kind of process where we're including the concerns that got brought up last week. So I appreciate your presentation and what you presented. It has more to do with that meeting and those concerns that were brought up.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Record show 4 ayes and 2 nays. The 2 nays being Councilmember Russell and Barentine.
Moving on to agenda item 12. This is general discussion. Thank you, sir. Under Mayor's Choice, we do have an executive session regarding security implementation, a conference with city staff for the purpose of discussing specialized details of security arrangements or investigations pursuant to CRS section 246402-4D. I'd entertain a motion to go into the executive session at this time. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Steve. Sorry. All votes have been cast. Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. For the benefit of the public, we will be heading into the community room for an private executive session. Shouldn't be too long, I don't think.
are you starting a fan club? Or I mean, can we send in for like signed autographs? Oh, come on! It was great. It was great. You know, few people do. I don't have stage fright, but my wife would sooner jump off a bridge than have her picture taken. Yeah. Oh. It is fine. Oh, yeah, they're so great. I wanted to test mine. Every time I try to get on my mobile lately, it acts like it's going to load, and it doesn't. On my laptop, no problem. I can always get right into the meeting. Yeah, like if I were to, because I always wonder, like, you know, if I break my leg and want to live stream the meeting, and I watch it on my phone, and I did it last year. I went back to visit my mom, and I was watching the meeting on live stream. No problem. And I mean, I haven't even tried it tonight. I shouldn't like say that without knowing, but it's been so consistent. I can, right. Yeah, and I just have a Droid, you know, Android phone. I'm not all fancy with the iPhone or anything. But I mean, I watched it on this phone last year, back in Indiana, and it was fine. Yeah, the live stream. Yeah, yeah. Oh, thanks.
city managers over there.
Okay, the time is now 9:43 p.m., and the executive session has been concluded. The participants in the executive session were myself, Mayor Pro Tem Rick Gillett, Councilmember Steve Yates, Amy Martinez, Councilmember Lorette Barentine, and Rita Russell. Also present were City Manager Eric Keck, Assistant City Manager Murphy Robinson, Chief of Police John Collins, Facilities Manager Dan Long, IT Director Margaret Brocklander, and Senior Network Engineer Dan Segrist. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session violating the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to go out of executive session. I've got a motion and a second. Any comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Vote's been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Council, we've only got a couple agenda items left. Can we push through, or do we need a bio break?
Bio break.
Bio break.
Nope, just go ahead if we think we can push through.
Yeah, if we got one member who's not going to make it, though, that could be an issue. So I think if one person needs a bio, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Let's take 5 minutes.
Or 2 minutes.
Or less, yes. It's never under 5. I always shoot for 5.
Your shot? No, they gave me. Well, get the shot, get it over with. I had that issue with my elbow. My arms are so afraid. I suffered through. They put that steroid shot right in. I almost cried like a baby. I mean, it hurt so bad for about an hour that I'm like. Next day, man, it was like it never was bad. They can drain that out and then put the steroid in. I'm telling you, just get it done. You'll be happier.
I don't want to go spend money.
I had it for like a year and a half. I just say they took the pills. I went, I'll work it out. Finally, the doctor said. And I'm like, oh my God, it hurt. I yelled.
I get it.
Hopefully that works. If not, don't be afraid to go to the next step.
Well, I had to go down, so.
It's just like before I got my knee replaced, you go out and they drain the fluid, and they put steroids in, and finally he's like, ready? I'm like, man, I have been ready for this for a long time. And it's just the scary part of moving on. Oh God. Yeah, I went. My insurance was supposed to have my surgery in December because I needed a skin test for allergies because I'm allergic to nickel, and the implant is mostly nickel. Before they could pay, the insurance would pay for the test. It brought me from a $750 deductible to a $7,500 deductible. They knew what they were doing. I said, I'm allergic. I stopped at 10. She says that word all the time. Huh? boy, boy. That is funny.
Okay, stick around for just a second. I'll try to coordinate a time. Okay, folks, if I get everybody to take their seats, we'll get started in about 1 minute.
Nice.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is council members' choice. Would anybody like to kick us off on members' choice?
I have nothing.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
I'll pass, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
Pass.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
Pass.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell.
I have nothing.
Thank you.
Oh, I could have waited to go to the bathroom. Not done.
Under Mayor's Choice, I just wanted to share that the NLC conference was once again, I think, a success. We did get snowed out for one day, so the CML activities on the Tuesday got canceled for only about 6 inches of snow. So for the folks from Colorado, we didn't think that was appropriate, but the federal town shuts down with a few inches, we found out. But still very successful. We were able to have a joint meeting with our two senators the Wednesday that we traveled. That same Wednesday, we were able to meet privately with Cory Gardner's office, with Cory Gardner himself and some of his staffers, as well as a Diana DeGette staffer. So I think it was yet another success. One idea that I would like to plant with everybody and maybe discuss at a later date is the concept. At the NLC conference, there was a lot of discussion surrounding sanctuary cities, surrounding welcoming communities. And given the rise of diversity in Englewood and our community, one of the ideas that came forward was a proclamation describing us as a welcoming community. Honestly, I hope that that's some common ground that we could all get up on to say that, we value diversity, that we're welcoming of immigrants, these type of things. And so, I would be supportive of something like that coming forward, but I'll leave some discussion for that perhaps for a later date. But again, a good, successful conference all around, I think. Councilmember Barentine.
I just have a question that doesn't suffice for your report that you have to do within 30 days after the conference.
I supposedly have to do a written one, so I'm well aware of that requirement.
I was just saying that doesn't get you off the hook.
I'm well aware. We did look into that after we did some verbals, and we realized that we were supposed to be doing written reports, and I've always done that for all of my travels recently. So
That's soon to come.
Soon to come. That's right. Councilmember Russell. Did you have anything? Sorry, was you? Oh,
I
did it last.
I will tell you this. I will tell you this right quick. I have a picture for your written report because it was on the NLC paper that we got of you meeting with Cory Gardner and.
Excellent.
We asked somebody to follow
they brought
you
a photographer, so apparently I made the cut.
We want to make sure Joe's working.
Yeah, and I've got some other photos that I would love to pass on to staff for Facebook posts and those type of things. I did take a few pictures on my camera as well, just to let the folks know we're actually doing some good things out there, I think.
It's a written report with pictures.
First time with pictures. Moving on to the city manager's report, because we've already done the agenda review. Anything, sir?
Just as a reminder, Council, I'm going to be absent next week visiting family.
Excellent. We will miss you, sir. Have a safe travels.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson will run the council meeting, and during the week itself, the rest of the week, Dorothy Hargrove will be in charge.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. Moving on to...
Well, wait a second. I didn't hear what Murphy said. What?
I said I will also be out of town for part of the week. That's why Dorothy's coming.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you. City Attorney's report.
You have a memo from my office regarding this quiet title action. I'm here to answer any questions if you'd like.
Yeah, what is it? It doesn't say what it is.
Well, they're trying to take some property we own along the city ditch. He's got a house that seems to is pushing itself onto the city ditch, and he thinks that he should own it. And no, you don't own it. We have a quitclaim for that whole thing. So.
Okay.
Is that the same individuals becoming to the water board, sewer board?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Is it what was unclear is who's wanting part of the ditch?
This is a private citizen. who owns a piece of property that's right next to the city ditch.
Is it on Huron?
No, it's Bannock, I believe.
Bannock, okay. Oh, no.
Okay, so that's all I have.
Thank you. With that, we are hereby adjourned.
They just fight.
Do that when I got a mouthful.